This is Connected Games Research, a series of lectures from leading scholars from around the world who study digital games from a wide range of disciplinary perspectives.
Hello everyone, my name is Sinem Sihan and I'm an Associate Professor of Learning Sciences and Educational Technology at California State University, San Marcos. I'm also the Associate Director of the Center for Research and Engagement in STEM Education at CSUSM. In this lecture, I will discuss how video games support family connection and learning. Before we get started, I want to say a few words about my own research and why I put together a lecture on video games and families. My research focuses on broadening participation in STEM through understanding the affordances of digital media and computing technologies for human-computer interaction, teaching, learning, and social change in the context of formal and informal learning environments. Throughout the last 15 years, I conducted many studies looking at how we can leverage video games to support family learning and connection. This resulted in a book that I co-authored with Elizabeth G. at Arizona State University called Families That Play, Connecting and Learning Through Video Games, published by the MIT Press. In this lecture, I will provide a context for our topic, starting with the screen time debate, followed by the social messages around parenting, as these two issues have been driving the discourse around video games and families, at least in the United States. From there, I will discuss how engaging families in video gaming is a means to support interest-driven learning and broadening participation in science, technology, engineering, and math. We will also touch base on how family gaming is portrayed in mainstream media in the United States and how this portrayal is problematic in inviting parents, especially mothers, into playing video games with their children. We will also talk about current research on family gaming, including the findings from my own research, and then discuss the implications for designing games for supporting intergenerational learning. We will conclude our lecture with what I see as future research and development trends around intergenerational play around video games. If you're following different outlets or groups related to child development, parenting, and digital media and learning on social media, you're probably familiar with the screen time debate. I myself run into at least one blog post each week about what parents should do to limit the amount of time their children spend on using digital tools, such as phones, tablets, and computers. The term screen time was originally introduced sometime between the 1960s and 1970s, when television became a household technology in the United States, and was later extended to include other digital devices. American Academy of Pediatrics fuels this debate by making recommendations such as no screen time for children under the age of 2 and up to 2 hours of high-quality screen time per day for older children. Parents are urged to create screen-free zones and limit their children's media consumption. Children's video gaming gets the most attention in the screen time debate, although children continue to spend more time watching television than playing video games. Further, video gaming is positioned as a spectator sport, when in fact it's an activity that necessitates active engagement and mental effort on the part of the players. The screen time debate continues to present video gaming in a negative light and perpetuates the negative perceptions of video games among parents. This leads to parents wanting to protect their children from video gaming rather than participating with their children in gameplay. This is really important because it's not to say that parents should not be monitoring their kids' media consumption, but rather they need to think about how they will be participating in kids' media consumption and how they can be co-learners along with their children. Another thing that shapes the current discourse around video games in the United States is the messages parents receive about what it means to be a good parent and a bad parent. Particularly mothers are under pressure to conform to social norms and expectations around parenting and child rearing. Among other things, mothers are criticized to let their kids play video games. For example, while fathers playing video games with their children is considered an act of being involved with their children's lives and showing an interest in spending time with them, mothers are questioned when they play video games with their children and judged about their choice of video games. For example, in one of my studies, a mother of three once lamented that she never had to justify letting her kids play with toy guns pretending to kill each other. But she always had to explain to her friends why she lets her 5-year-old daughter play Halo with her and with the entire family. Many studies on children and video games utilize interest-driven learning framework, where video games are positioned as an interest of children from which they develop other interests and pursue learning opportunities. For example, a child shows interest in animals. They read books about animals, they play with animal toys, they go to the zoo, and they play video games that are about taking care of animals. From interest-driven learning perspective, the role of parents is to broker these experiences for their children to support their interest in learning. Interest-driven learning puts the child at the center of learning and positions parents as a mediator between the child and their learning, rather than focusing on parents and children as a collaborative unit who learn together. However, playing video games could also be a shared interest in the context of families, rather than solely a personal interest of the child. It can create opportunities for generations to connect and learn from each other. For example, a parent who enjoyed playing video games could be excited about playing video games that focus on taking care of animals with their children. This is similar to parents wanting to share their favorite music or books with their children and connecting with their children while they support their children's learning. Another related issue in forming video games in the context of family connection and learning is broadening participation in science, technology, engineering, and math. It has been speculated that early interest and exposure to video gaming support boys in pursuing STEM careers later in life, especially in computer science. There has been many attempts to engage girls in video gameplay and design at a young age to close the gender gap in STEM. Of course, the gaps in STEM not only falls into gender lines, but it also falls into racial, ethnic, and social economic lines. Attempts to broaden participation in STEM through video games continue to focus on the individual child rather than the family context. In other words, parents are often an afterthought in broadening participation in STEM efforts. If it's true that video games can plant seeds for later STEM engagement and interest among children, then we need to consider the context of families and understand how the seeds are planted and for whom they're planted and how. We often forget that video gaming takes place in the context of home, not school or after-school environments. Messages around video gaming and STEM more broadly are being communicated to children by parents. Therefore, it's important that we understand the opportunities that exist and needed to be created in the family context around video gaming to optimize its potential for children's learning in the service of more equitable participation in STEM activities and careers. The last issue I would like to touch on is the current portrayal of family gaming on mainstream media. These are common images of family video gaming in the media today, and ones that are promoted by the game industry. Families, each person with their own controllers having fun, probably playing a game like Family Game Night. On one hand, these are good because they cast video games in a positive light as something that the entire family can enjoy. But on the other hand, family video gaming involves a lot more than interacting with the screen and spending leisure time. These images do not capture the potential for family learning around video games and how playing video games can be a family routine that is part of the fabric of family life. Families are doing lots of other interesting, productive, and meaningful things with and around video games, and they could do even more with some support from educators and game designers. To summarize what we discussed so far, there are many challenges and gaps that make it hard to optimize the potential of video games for family learning and connection. These challenges include the current discourse around screen time and parenting, lack of consideration of family as a collaborative unit for supporting interest-driven learning and broadening participation in STEM, and the ways in which video games are currently positioned by media and game industry. Okay, now let's look at disciplines involved in studying family gaming and learning. As you can see, we have diverse group of disciplines, from psychology to education to computer science to game design. And each of these disciplines approach the topic of family gaming and learning from a different angle. For example, education is more interested in teaching and learning around video games and in the context of families. Humanities usually focuses on how video games are taken up by society and what are some of the meanings that people make around video games. Psychology is usually interested in understanding social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes on kids. So, for example, if kids are playing video games with or without their parents, and just more broadly, if they're playing video games, what are some of the outcomes, positive or negative? And of course, human-computer interaction and computer science is interested in developing, games and understanding how the games are taken up by different learners. And game designers usually is interested in designing video games and what features afford what kinds of interactions in a game, and also in the context of families. Now, there are a few common types of research studies on family gaming. Mostly studies focus on large and small scale surveys where researchers, ask questions to children and or parents about their gaming behaviors and interests and their likes and dislikes. There is also a lot of ethnographic studies that's been done on family gaming, where the focus is on the researcher sort of spending time with the family and try to understand how the video games are taken up in the context of families. Also, interview studies are common on family gaming, where researchers interview kids, again, and or parents around some of their concerns, some of their likes, and some of their behaviors around video games. And then lab studies, while it's less common, it's also another sort of way of studying family gaming, where researchers ask parents and kids to come to a lab setting where they play video games or they interact with things, and researchers are able to capture interactions between parents and kids. Now let's look at current research on family gaming. Humans have a long history with games. The games humans designed and played have become more sophisticated and diverse with respect to their content, mechanism, and purpose as humans develop new tools, technologies, and way of thinking. Today, people around the world play all kinds of games, including but not limited to video games, for a wide variety of reasons. Many people grow up playing board and card games with their family members, but not so much with video games. The large-scale surveys over the years suggest family gaming makes up a small portion of people's gaming experiences, and family gaming experiences are declining over the years. Now let's take a closer look at the results from 2020 Entertainment Software Association survey. So, according to the survey, 95% of parents are present when the child obtains video games, and 86% of parents require permission for new game purchases. So, here we're seeing um, parents are mediating their children's gaming by monitoring their gameplay, focusing on the content and the types of games that they play. 73% of parents believe video games are educational. So this is a really good trend because research previously showed that parents were not certain whether video gaming was educational or not. So we see in 2020, more than half of the parents who responded to the survey actually believe that video games are educational. 65% of parents play games because it's a good opportunity to socialize with their children. 63% play games with their kids because it's fun for the family. And 55% of parents play games with their child at least weekly. So the survey captures a wide range of children's age. So it's unclear, for example, when 55% of parents say they're playing video games with their children, whether they're talking about their young children or middle school children or high school children. However, overall, these are positive trends. So we're seeing that parents are not only seeing video games as educational, but they're also seeing the social benefits of playing video games with their children. There's a robust literature on the importance of parent-child play during early childhood and the long history of families playing sports, card, and board games. However, it seems these family practices do not completely translate and involve playing video games at the same rate. The number of studies on the families and video games is also relatively small. Research on families and video games had a false start in 1985 with the introduction of home consoles, but then stalled until mid to late 2000s. So in 1985, Michelle conducted an ethnographic study of families playing console games together. And what she found is that parents and kids play together, but they enjoy playing together. However, gaming was also created some conflict between parents and kids. And later, after this stall of research on families and gaming, in 2000s, we see that researchers started to focus on families and video games again. And I think one of the reasons for the stall is the direction the game industry took the design of the video games upon launching home consoles in 1980s. While early games like Pac-Man, Pong, Mario Brothers appealed to a broad audience, others that came after focused more on shooting and fighting types of games until early 2000s. So, for example, around 2007, Arsent did another ethnographic study on how grandparents and children interacted around video games. And what he found is that the division of labor, if you will, between grandparents and kids when it comes to video games was an asset. So the fact that grandparents didn't know, about video games was actually a good thing, where it allowed grandparents and kids to connect with one another. Similarly, later, other researchers found that games was a context for fathers and boys, particularly to connect. And also, family gaming usually took place in the context of siblings. So there is research on looking at how siblings play video games together and what kinds of activities that engage around video games. And then later, We have other studies that show the benefit of families playing together, especially promoting stronger social ties among family members. While it is really exciting to see that the scholarship around families and video games is growing, there are two areas that I believe we need to pay attention as we move forward. First, there is a disconnect between the emerging scholarship on families and video games and the robust literature on parent-child interaction around shared activities. For example, going all the way to Vygotsky and Brunner, we know that parents facilitate their children's learning around shared activities, such as cooking, playing, solving problems, and visiting museums. We also know that conversations between parents and children during these shared activities support children's metacognition, higher order thinking skills, and content expertise development. So I think it's important to investigate if and how some of the findings from previous literature on parent-child interaction around shared activities applies to the shared activity of playing video games. That said, the literature on parent-child interaction around shared activities conceptualizes the relationship between parents and children unidirectional, in that it is the parent, the more knowledgeable partner, who provides scaffolding help to the child. But in the context of video games, there is a need to reconceptualize parent-child interactions, scaffolding, and learning that occurs in this context. For example, it's children who have the domain expertise when it comes to video gaming compared to their parents. Parents and children can simultaneously take the role of a teacher and a learner. Further, parents interacting with their younger children will look very different than their interaction with their older children around video games. We need to understand the role of domain knowledge and developmental differences in shaping family interaction and learning around video games. As I mentioned in the beginning of this lecture, I have compiled the studies I have conducted over the years into a co-authored book. My work builds off of and expands the literature I reviewed during this lecture. In the book, I share the results from 5 different studies that I conducted between 2008 and 2016. If we divide research into 2 main categories, one category being the highly controlled researcher-constructed lab studies, and the other category being the user-constructed research that takes place in naturalistic settings in the wild, many studies on families and video games, as I mentioned earlier, follow the later. The 3 out of 5 research projects that I've done in collaboration with Elizabeth G are also conducted in the wild. For example, as part of the Joint Media Engagement Play Literacy and Learning Project, we did a 6-month-long ethnography with Mexican American families where we collected interviews, survey, and observational data about their gaming practices. On another study, we carried out a focus group interview with parents about their perceptions of video games. In Families at Play project, we designed activities around commercial video games, such as Minecraft, Sims, and Civilization, and run 90-minute family gaming events to engage parents and middle school children in family learning around video games. I also conducted studies that fall somewhere in between. For example, in Family Quest project, I designed 3D narrative-based game experiences for families and ran a family after-school program where parents and children played through the games I designed. Using the game system, I was able to test some of the design features and how they impacted the conversation between parents and children. Similarly, in the Games at Museums study, I designed different worlds in Minecraft and tailored these worlds to different parts of an exhibit at a museum and explored how different game experiences support families' visit at the museum. I have a lot of findings across these 5 different projects that I discuss in details in my book, but in this lecture, I will focus on 5 key findings that I believe you will find interesting. games families play are far more diverse than what is portrayed in mainstream media. Earlier, I mentioned that mainstream media portrays this image of family members with each having their own controllers playing so-called family-friendly games on a console. However, what we found is that many of the games families play do not fit in the family-friendly games genre. Here are only a few examples of the kinds of games families play together and individually. Families play both multi-user and single-user games together across different platforms. Families grow out of playing a certain game. For example, they may spend 3 months playing a game and then not touch it for a year and come back to it later in a few months. Parents and older siblings introduce video games to younger children. It is common for a parent or older sibling to play a game and then pass their interest and expertise to other children at home. For example, a parent might start playing World of Warcraft with her middle school son, and then the son introduced the game to his sister 3 years later when she's old enough to play with him. Families choose a game to play for a variety of reasons. For example, a game can have cultural and social ties for the families. It might have a sentimental value. For example, when parents use video games to share something from their own childhood with their kids. A game could also expand families and or the child's interest in real life. For example, Minecraft often came up in our research because of its potential to expand children's play from physical world to the digital world. But it also connected generations because parents who grew up playing with physical Legos enjoyed playing Minecraft with their kids. Many parents we interviewed played video games growing up, however, stopped playing video games as adults due to time constraints, household chores, and work. Those who did not play video games expressed an interest in learning more about video games. And the reason they were more interested in because their child was showing an interest and their child was playing with other kids, playing video games with other kids. And parents observed that video games was part of children's culture. The second key finding is that gaming is a family routine and ritual. Relationships between family members are organized around shared activities, routines, rituals such as eating dinner, doing household chores, watching television, shopping, taking a vacation, and playing video games. The terms routine and ritual are often used interchangeably. However, there's a difference between the two. Both routines and rituals occur naturally in the flow of family life. Routines are repeated mundane activities families do without much thinking. Rituals are repeated activities with symbolic meanings for families that promote a sense of belonging, tradition, and group identity. Playing video games can be a family routine and ritual that creates closeness and social connections among family members. For example, one of our participants, Hector, and his 2 young sons play Subway Surfers on Hector's cell phone after he came back from work. This ritual took place for about an hour before Diana, his wife, prepared dinner for the family. Hector valued the time he spent with his sons and the opportunity to connect with them around something they're interested in. For 5-year-old Emma and her parents and other participants in our research, playing Halo with their extended family who lived in a different state meant that they were building friendships through sharing an interest and strengthening familial bonds. The two sets of families, Emma's parents, her aunt, uncle, and cousin, organized their everyday life to carve out time to schedule play dates where everyone logged into the game to play together. Another important finding is that family gaming provides multiple opportunities for teaching and learning. The anthropologist Eleanor Ochs and her colleagues describe dinner time as an opportunity space in which family members construct roles, relationships, values, and worldviews through the stories they tell while spending time eating dinner together. They describe an opportunity space as a temporal, spatial, and social moment that provides the possibility of joint activity among family members. Spending time eating dinner together creates an opportunity to generate knowledge and social order, as well as disorder through interactions with family members. Just like eating dinner, playing video games also provide an opportunity space for teaching and learning to occur. Here are the couple of ways families engage in teaching and learning around video games. For example, in addition to actually playing video games together, family members watch each other play games, make suggestions, and provide coaching. In their book, Learning Conversations in Museums, Lenhart, Crowley, and Knudsen describe conversations in the context of museums as both process and outcome of museum learning. They observe that people do not come to museums to talk, but often end up talking, and in these varied conversations, what they call learning conversations, much learning can take place. Similarly, people do not play video games to talk, but they often do talk while playing. This talk ranges from discussions of managing gameplay to negotiating and resolving disagreements around different strategies to connecting gameplay experience to other family experiences. These conversations support learning by creating opportunities for problem solving and collaboration, as well as cultivating patience and persistence. We also found that not all family interactions around video games are productive and collaborative. Older siblings tend to be the ones who are exposed to video games first. For example, many devices are purchased for the older sibling and then passed down to the younger child in the family. Further, the older sibling usually is more knowledgeable about gaming, and because they are the ones who initially own the devices, they can assert control over how and when the gaming devices are being used at home. Parents and children can also get into conflicts while playing video games. For example, if they do not agree on a strategy or have different tolerance levels for failure, parents and children may decide to end the gaming session. Relatedly, parents and children can be more controlling and less cooperative while playing video games. For example, children who had confidence in their knowledge and ability to play a game at our family events that we ran tended to take over the game and prevent their parents from actively participating in the gameplay. This brings up two important issues. One, we need to differentiate between productive and unproductive family engagement with video games so that we can better support family connection and learning around video games. Two, we need to critically evaluate how we're designing video games for families, such that the game itself can nudge families to more productively engage with one another and take the role of a partner or co-learner. Overall, we found that games are part of the daily experiences of women and girls as much as men and boys in the context of family life. In addition to playing games and watch other people play games, women and girls talk about games with other family members, solve problems or play a difficult part for other family members, and visit websites related to games. Women and girls spend significant time playing games in the presence of males and interacting around games with them in the family context. Fathers and older brothers provide support to women and girls by introducing games, being a role model, and coaching them around games. Additionally, women and girls position themselves differently in relation to gaming in a family context, taking roles like gamer, rule maker, spectator, and co-participant. However, some aspects of gaming experiences of mothers and girls fall into gender lines. To begin with, consistent with the current literature, we observe that women and girls interacted with gaming consoles such as Xbox and PS the least in the family. However, one of the important reasons behind this lack of interaction is related to difficulty with the hardware, for example, the gaming controllers for women. The gaming experiences of mothers in our study evolved around handheld devices like smartphones and tablets that allow them to play games alone and with their younger children, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the physical and social arrangement of devices introduced barriers for girls to access and use gaming consoles at home. Secondly, mothers, as opposed to fathers, express concern over their children's gaming and reinforce rules around games in our study. However, mothers express their concern and reinforce rules around games irrespective of the gender of their children. In fact, it seemed mothers' attitudes were related to what games they found educational and what they considered to be the best use of time for children and family. Out of many roles that mothers take, they often did not see themselves as gamers, although they played games on their phones, and often reported being less knowledgeable person in the family about video games. To summarize our research findings, games families play are diverse. So they're not limited to family-friendly games or multi-user experiences. Gaming is a family routine and ritual. It's not just a leisurely activity, and it's important to note that it's not just driven by a child's interest in gaming. Gaming could be a shared interest among family members. Family gaming provides opportunities for teaching and learning. So family gaming is not just socialization and emotional connection. It doesn't just provide opportunities for socialization and emotional connection. It also provides opportunities for teaching and learning. Not all family interactions are productive and collaborative around video games. Conflicts and disagreements arise depending on expertise and parent-child dynamics outside of the game. And finally, gender dynamics around video games impact the participation of mothers and girls in gaming. Important to note that the debate on screen time and messages around parenting particularly influence mothers' perspectives and participation in gaming. And the gender dynamics undermine the use of video games as a means to support girls' engagement with STEM. So let's discuss some of the implications of our research findings and findings from other studies conducted by other researchers for future research and game development. What I shared with you are only a few examples of what happens when families play video games together. Families could do even more with some support from game designers and educators. Parents, especially mothers, are looking for some kind of a personal connection to the content of video games. So, for example, many of the mothers that we spoke to did not find some of the games attractive, the content of the games attractive. Trivia or exer games are fun, but they do little to sustain the interest of families for long periods of time and engage parents who do not usually play video games with their children. Game designers need to start thinking more broadly about the content of family-friendly games. Family-friendly games need to connect family gaming experiences with real-world experiences and need to offer value to families beyond sort of killing time or just socializing. Further, there are many games designed for young children and adults, but not many for people in between. We need to start thinking about the developmental differences and the needs of different age groups when we're designing video games. When designing games for families, game designers need to create opportunities for parents and children to exchange their expertise. For instance, in many cases, children are better at using the controllers and mastering the game mechanics than their parents, while their parents are better at strategizing in the game. Family learning is enhanced when parents and children take responsibility over the different aspects of gameplay. Finally, we need to start designing not just for the interaction between the player and the game world, but the meaningful interactions between players who are at different developmental levels. When we design games for families, the interactions between players need to promote conversations that will go beyond the discussion of the logistics of gameplay and transform family members' understanding of each other and the world. Finally, we need more design studies that focus on creating experiences with and around video games for families to understand um, how we can support family learning through video games. As I look into the future, I see tremendous opportunities around virtual reality games where we can design real world like experiences and scaffold family conversations to optimize their learning. For example, when parents and children visit a zoo, family conversation may or may not occur. But in a virtual reality game, we can design the experience such that they discuss different pieces of information and learn together about different animals and solve interesting problems. The second opportunity I see for family learning is around designing video games. Making as a pedagogical approach to learning is growing in education and becoming a key component of broadening participation in STEM and creating inclusive STEM learning experiences. I believe engaging families in making their own games can be one way to facilitate family STEM learning and help them develop important skills that are valued both in schools and in the workplace, such as design thinking, systems thinking, and computational thinking. The skills that adults need to exercise in the workplace are the same skills that children are expected to develop in schools. According to Thomas and Brown, the 21st century is about learning to embrace change and figure out how to get the most out of it. They suggest that both adults and children can use play as a strategy for dealing with change and adapting to the new demands of the world. The constantly changing world has also resulted in a new culture of learning that Thomas and Brown describe as embedded in everyday social interactions in communities, intertwined with identities people develop, driven by shared interests and passions, and propelled by digital media technologies. And I believe play is an important aspect of cultivating a family learning culture. Video games are especially powerful medium that families can leverage to develop skills that are valued in the 21st century. I like to conclude this lecture with a quote from the late Seymour Papert, who recently died at the age of 88. Papert is best known for his work with Logo and the concept of constructionism, and many people don't know about his book, The Connected Family, published in 1996, where he provides recommendations for how parents could leverage the power of computers. Papert was ahead of his time in many ways, and the ideas in this book are no exception. I found inspiration in his work for reconceptualizing games as opportunities for, not barriers to, family connections and learning. In his book, he says, "My bottom line was that parents should recognize the need to build new kinds of relationships with their children and should see the computer as a vehicle for building rather than as an obstacle to family cohesion. Parents should spend less time worrying about what the kids are doing or not doing with computers and more time trying to find common interests or projects to do together." In this quote, you can replace computers with video games, and that really captures how video games can support family connection and learning. And thank you for watching this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it.